Welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast with Don and Suzanne Manning.
A podcast where we share with you great insights about everything family from over 30 years of parenting 7 kids and over a decade of equipping parents through our Crazy Cool Family ministry.
So let us inspire and equip you to build your best family.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have some very special guests today talking about special needs. And man, if you would have asked me 20 years ago what special needs, one, I wouldn't have been able to tell you anything. Now I know a little bit more about it, but I also just understand more, especially with talking to Katie and Steve, that, just how broad this encompasses and how there's just so many crying out needs. So first of all, just Katie and Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're so glad to be here.
Tell them a little bit about, I love your family story and how this website and membership got started. So give us a little history of your family.
Sure. So I'm a Navy brat. Steve was a Navy officer. We were the kind of kids who hadn't really seen a whole lot of stress or strife, and instead parenthood became something completely unexpected for us. Our first minute out the gate, we had a son who had a medical crisis, and our life changed in that moment. And so the remainder of our military journey together and all of the time in our parenting since has been very much wrapped up in navigating a life we didn't expect. And it's been filled with many blessings and many challenges. And so we have 5 kids. We've been married now almost 23 years. I don't know. It's going. It's been a long time, almost 23 years. And
do we need to get you a calculator so you can make the addition?
It's not been long enough. That's all that matters. And we've had a really broad range of various diagnoses with our kids. We also homeschool them. So that has added another layer of knowledge and challenge and fun to the whole situation. And we felt that we were called to turn outward to help other families after we had been on this journey for a long time. We saw families around us just struggling, and we felt like we'd been blessed with people to pour into us and a lot of knowledge that God had imparted and just our own experiences. And we wanted to just turn and start helping others. And so we launched a membership.
Yeah. And Her Home and Health.
Her Home and Heart.
Home and Heart.
The membership is actually called The Greater Honor, and we have a podcast that's currently called Her Home and Heart, and it's on Apple and all over the place.
Yep. And so the podcast, we'll put all this in the show notes, but it's similar to what we did with Crazy Cool Family. We just got invested in, saw God's provision for family and things like that. And so, and really got so much benefit from what people had invested in us that we wanted to give back. And it sounds like that's exactly what God has put on your heart.
Yes.
So then really what does special needs encompass? Like, what would you say? There's so many different things. And I think sometimes people, I remember, this will be a silly example, but when kids wouldn't eat, when a child wouldn't eat, and Suzanne would be like, oh, we would never, our kid would never do that or whatever. And then we had a child that was a picky eater, and we're like, oh, okay, we get it. We get what's happening. I think people who have never experienced special needs are like, oh my goodness, there's so many special needs out there. Everybody's got an issue these days or whatever, and whether they say it or not, that's what they're thinking, And so what do you think, what really does encompass special needs, and what are those, what's a commonality of what those parents are experiencing?
Yeah, this was a great question that some of the moms broached inside of the membership. There's also dads in the membership, by the way, but I'm just talking about the moms in my experience.
Right.
So they also wanted to know that, especially before they joined, like, well, does my kid count? Does ADHD count? Is that a special need? And ultimately, there are so many various needs that cause an impact on the family function, an impact on the marriage, an impact on the raising of the children, whether that is educational needs, behavioral needs, physiological needs. There's so many, and there's so many diagnoses within all of that. But really what we believe it boils down to is, what's the impact on the family? Is this something that's actually changing the functionality of the family and adding layers of stress? And there's not a lot of guidance out there. If that's the case and you're struggling, we believe that's a special need.
Well, and so you just said something I want to explore a little bit. You said changing the dynamics of the family and adding stress. So is that a commonality you see that is really that what is and maybe the better way to ask it is what are the things that most common things that special needs families are facing that's different than somebody? I mean, we've never had a special needs kid. I mean, we've been blessed with good health and we've never had any real emotional issues or whatever, not that they've been perfect kids by any stretch. I mean, sometimes they've definitely added stress into the house, no doubt. But I mean, I think you're talking about a particularly acute stress and in these behaviors, right?
Yes, it's very universal. That is that there's not a part of the family life that's not impacted. So in some cases, it's a dietary change that has to happen, and
Mm,
that requires additional time, and it usually costs extra money, right? Because
yeah, yeah,
you're eating outside of the normal stuff that's offered in grocery stores and whatnot. So,
right.
there's a very simple instance. So everything that has to do with time, it takes longer to help a child get ready each day. It takes longer to help them manage everyday functions that a child who develops typically can handle on themselves.
Yep.
Uh, there's site social pressures, if you will, or social difficulties, in that say you're not able to interact with other families the same as everyone else does. So birthdays, parties, get-togethers, sleepovers, holiday get-togethers, all of that stuff
Yes.
sometimes
Wow.
off the table. And so there's family pressure because it strains everybody personally. It strains relationships if the house is filled with additional noise or different behaviors that are very taxing. Even if you love the child, right? It can still be
Mhm.
taxing. And a lot of this culminates in separation from others, which leads then towards loneliness. You wouldn't think that an entire family could feel lonely, but in a sense, after a while, you do feel forgotten because people
Yeah,
simply stop
and
asking.
then siblings feel like they have responsibilities that maybe they wouldn't have in a quote unquote normal home.
It's true.
The parents are, distracted from work. I would think, they because they, I just got back from a conference and I was just talking to a guy who had an autistic son, and he was talking about the cost it had. He has a great relationship with his son. His son is pretty highly functioning, but that it was everything was always different.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say is that kind of the case? Again, I haven't experienced it, so I'm just kind of speaking into what I feel is happening. But it's always different. It seems like, right?
Yeah.
It is because both of us are from large families and our siblings don't have special needs kids. And so we're different in every respect. So we can't make our we can't do the things that they can do.
We can't
So
attend all the functions. We
so
can't
it's
eat the food
different.
they make. We
Yeah,
can't stay as long, even if we could visit, we wouldn't be able to really stay. Like it really impacts people. One of the precious families that we know just had to leave from the family event for the holidays that they had just arrived to because of the inability for their special needs child to self-regulate. And it was causing such a disturbance among the gathering, and nothing they did was helping. So they just had to leave and travel all the way back home. And it was their decision. It wasn't the family asking, but we all know that the rest of the family probably was relieved. And that is a very hard position to be in. It's a very hard position because you're already grieving over the loss of your dreams for your child, the expectations for your family, and what you wanted for your child and your family. And then to have these other social impacts, even if it's just a child with allergies, a child with severe nut allergy, it's hard to go anywhere because sometimes those children are allergic to a nut in the air. If there's nuts being eaten in the room, they can't join. Now you become
Mhm.
somewhat of a social outcast. People don't want you, at their birthday parties because it just causes an extra layer of stress. And that's not even like a cognitive disability. That's just a food disability. And we see it all the time. The isolation, the um, unwillingness for others to even attempt to put themselves in your shoes, or just plain really thoughtless comments that also are alienating.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. The thought I want to explore that very particularly in a minute. But let's talk about just for a second before we go there, like what is life like in the home? You were talking about isolation and things like that. So day to day, when these parents and kids are in the home, what are you seeing in those families, and how do you help them?
Mhm. Well, we see a lot of different things, and it's really unique for each family, interestingly. But there are themes. A lot of the themes are the parents can't coordinate on how they want to parent. They feel hopeless and helpless. There's anger issues often. They're just exhausted, which can then lead to what appears to be anger as well. And they may feel guilty, like, why am I always angry? When actually there's other emotions that aren't being recognized, or they just need a break, or they just need someone to listen to them and understand them. There are oftentimes these families really are struggling with, they can't go to church. They can't take
Mhm.
their kid to VBS.
Unless maybe their church has a special needs ministry of some type, which is
It
rare.
Very,
is rare,
very
Yeah.
rare.
very
Yeah.
rare. And
Very.
even if they do, it's usually for the children who are at the low end of special needs and disability.
Meaning high functioning.
Yeah, they could do that. So you're not going to put a kid into a situation like that if they have seizures, because a lot of times those
Yeah.
people are like, we can't handle. I
Or
thought
Yeah.
we were only talking about behavioral issues.
well,
Or
Yeah.
allergies.
and if the behavioral issues are too bad, they're not welcome either.
Yeah.
It's, more like if there's educational disabilities, there's oftentimes an outreach for that, but it depends on the church. And then with church leadership changing, those often shift and often die.
Hmm. Hmm.
Outreaches die. So a lot of people that we see repeatedly say, we have nowhere to go to corporately worship. So
And
that's
so when
actually,
you look at the families, and I'm just trying to help people like me empathize better, and to tell people like that have, that have special needs, man, you're not alone in this. People that might not have any help, it really is something that's isolating, and it's frustrating. Those things are very real, and they were real to you guys.
oh,
And
very.
and so when you started to see one, I even think there's times, as I talk to parents, it's like, well, I don't know. Is my kid on the spectrum? I don't know really. Is this really ADHD or not? Is he just acting out? I mean, what is it? You even have questions about, am I being a bad parent? Am I being a good parent, bad parent? I mean, is this my fault? So many things that are questions. And I guess there's times when you just know. But I mean, but what do you feel like you guys went through, and what do you see other families going through, and how do you help those families?
Well, the first thing that we do to help families is to offer community and understanding from a perspective of walking in their shoes, different diagnosis, similar life. That is probably the most comforting thing we've ever personally experienced, which is why we started the membership. Because when we had attended a neurodevelopmental institute, we walked into the lobby of this place, and all of a sudden, there were all these families from other countries. But it was like no longer were we that weird family with the broken kid. Neither were they. Instead, it was like, oh, we're just all families again, and all of our children have challenges, and we're all here to roll up our sleeves and figure it out. And we still to this day keep in touch with a few of them and love them. And it was just this amazing experience that we realized, wait, we need to replicate this. We need each other. We need, even though we have these other people that love us and adore us and want to help us, there's nothing like the comfort of having a listening ear that can say, you know what, me too. I really understand.
Mhm.
I really get that. That's the first thing. And so community is huge. Also, resources, understanding what's a safe resource. There's a lot of bogus stuff out there, and it can be very overwhelming as well, even when there's good options. And so it's nice to hear what other parents have experienced.
Mhm.
To be able to hear, well, I really like this. This really helped my child. There's a lot of that goes on inside of our membership. The moms offering ideas and solutions and books that helped. And right now, we're even working through a book helping us process emotions. And
Mhm.
that's been a huge deal for every single one of us in there, because there's a lot of emotion that comes along with the grief and the isolation and the confusion and just all of the things come along with a life you didn't expect, especially in this aspect of it. So, helping families really just be seen, be heard, be understood, and have access to a community that can pray for them, cry with them,
You,
understand what they're walking through.
you just said something I want to explore a little bit. You said what they didn't expect.
Mhm.
And so, how do you help a parent? I mean, we tell parents all the time, and it's easy for us to say, had 7 kids with no major issues. So, okay, great, Don. That's great for you or whatever. But here's, we tell parents all the time, you've been handpicked for this job.
Mhm.
God didn't wake up one day and go, oh my goodness, I gave you this kid, or whatever. So, but when you've been handpicked to have a special needs kid, in some way, or, however you view that theologically, you can't say, I don't think you can't look at the Bible and go, God hates you. And so he gave you this kid or whatever. I mean, I think that and we see so many stories of how the special needs child has blessed the family and deepened their faith. And they're usually so many times so joyful. And, what do you tell that parent that has been dealt a hand they're not expected, to change their belief system to say, still, God is good and he has taken care of me and he loves me. And it's not a mistake as much as it is an opportunity. How do you do that with these parents? I can't do that because I haven't been through it, but how do you guys do that?
Yeah. So I do remember so often Katie and I being told stuff like, oh, you got this, and God doesn't make mistakes, and he must really think you're tough and stuff like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
was the
And,
one.
and
He won't
sometimes,
give you more than you can handle.
Yeah.
and like, but I feel like I'm overloaded.
Yeah.
I'm underwater, whatever the case is.
Right.
So let's stay away from the cliches, right? But if I were talking to a brand new dad or mom of a special needs kid, there's no harm in being factual. This is going to be hard. Your
Right.
experience is going to be different than everyone around you, and those are truthful. The same faith that you have in God for all of the other areas in your life where you say, yes, I believe the Bible, I believe what it says, still applies. But now you feel like it just got cranked up quite a lot, but it's still true. And so it will take perhaps a good long time to reconcile that.
Yep.
Between your thinking. So the disconnect that might immediately appear between what your heart says and what your brain thinks, and trying to get those back into alignment. Because you might have been super psyched to have that first kid and think, oh, this is going to be so joyful and wonderful, and then something happens, and it could be anywhere from disappointing to very, very serious medical circumstances, and it sort of breaks that joy that you were expecting on your first day of being a parent.
Right.
It can be recovered, but it is going to look different than what you initially expected. Yes. And it's going to be far different from everyone else's experience. And so please don't compare the two.
It has to be intentional.
It does have to be an intentional. Yeah. You do have to think about it, and you have to work through it. And it is difficult in one sense, is that there may be nothing that can be done to help your child to be 100%.
Right.
There's
Right.
things that you can do, but there may not be a cure for whatever is happening. That is our personal experience.
Speaking of intentional, I mean, so often, we hear about special needs children or the passing of a child, which sometimes happens with special needs too, that a child dies young, maybe at 9 years old or 12 years old, they're just the lifespan maybe. And just the devastation to the marriages because of, it just the grief. And how do you guys help? Not just, I'm not talking about death situations, although I'm sure you deal with that, but just in the normal everyday life of marriages, what counsel do you give people as far as how to keep your marriage going great in the midst of having a special needs child?
Yeah, we do a lot of podcasts on that actually. And I'll say that one thing we did recently in the membership, this doesn't relate specifically to marriage, but it does to the fact that, walking through this grief is real. We had a guest in our membership to discuss lament, biblical lament, because it's
Mhm.
not talked about enough in church. And it's a real part of our life. And it's an opportunity that we actually have. It doesn't seem like lament would be an opportunity, but it is that opportunity that in the middle of what feels like a crisis, that we can still choose to worship and to trust the Lord in the middle of that pain, and have a way to pray that's still very biblical, very respectful to God, but to intentionally state our complaint and say, Lord, what is going on? And we
Mhm.
just recently walked through that with our families, because that is so important. We can get shamed very often, shamed for having
Mm.
lament. Unfortunately, there's a misunderstanding among many Christian communities that having sorrow, having grief, they'll think, oh, you're just not spiritually strong enough. Or they'll give you that little like, well, you know what? You're just not trusting God good enough. Your faith must be weak. And, oh, no, no, no.
Right,
Get back
right.
in the Bible and see what it really says. There's a lot in
Mhm.
there about lament. And it's a thing that we need to accept and embrace as Christians, because we can grow closer to the Lord through that. And so allowing yourselves as a couple to lament together is also important, and to go to the Lord together. That is the first thing that can strengthen your marriage more than anything else, is just putting our faces up to God and saying, Lord,
Yeah.
what is happening? And then from there, catch those moments, after work, sit down, have coffee together or tea, just talk
Mhm.
together. Just keep your friendship strong. Hold hands, even when you're taking out the garbage. Like, do whatever you can to date each other in the middle of the stress. Just the little simple things.
Well, what I hear you is that, some things for the parents that have a special needs child, community,
Yeah.
intentionality.
Mhm.
You know, we were just I'm going to probably annoy people because we just did a Christmas podcast, and so this won't come out till next year. But I mean, we were just recording a Christmas podcast, and I was, and it has some comparison. Like anytime you are stressed, anytime, and that's what really. And I'm not Christmas shopping and having special needs children. We're not talking about the same thing here. So please, that's where I think it would be annoying to people. But I mean, but I'm just saying that anytime, what I said in the podcast was, when you are stressed in the Christmas season, how are you going to be healthy? That's looking to be healthy all the time. And the more stressed you are, the more that you need to look for health, because that's how you're going to cope. And I think that that's where the analogy applies. So please don't do
Yeah.
the comparison. I'm not
Good.
comparing Christmas shopping to special needs children,
A
but I
good
think
analogy.
but it is a good analogy, because anytime we think about, we tend to, when stress happens, let it spiral downward.
Yes.
And the Lord would say, no, that's when I want you to come to me. That's
Mm.
when I want, Jesus withdrew. He withdrew to lonely places and prayed. And,
Yes.
and all the people were clamoring around him wanting to be healed. And it says in the midst of that, he, all of a sudden they're like, where'd Jesus go? Well, he went to go find the Father. And so I think that's what you're saying as well, is that community helps, the intentionality helps, belief helps. That's one of the things that that's what I was trying to bring up, is so often our belief system can be damaged when we have crisis and adversity like this. And so what are we doing to help our belief system? Well, let's switch over for a minute as we kind of land the plane a little bit to okay, so I'm just thinking of an example here. I am a person who does not have a special needs kid, and maybe I have a small group, and here comes, or maybe I have a neighbor, or maybe I have somebody at church that I meet, and and all of a sudden they start talking to me, and I see their family, and they've got a special needs child of some kind. And so God has put that family in my life for, and I believe that God wants me to connect with them. What's the best thing we can do to help them
Mm.
and to
That's a long.
serve them?
Well, I'm going to take her long list. Let me jump in there before she starts it. Ask.
Yeah.
And don't stop asking,
Mm.
because what will happen so often, hey, is there anything I can do for you? And then the onus gets put on the people to try and figure out, well, what could this person do? Just offer some help. Hey, can I help you take care of some yard work? Can I
Mhm.
help you in this way or that way? A lot of times, if we're invited to do things, we just can't participate for all the reasons we've already talked about. And usually after one or two, no, that doesn't work for our family, they just stop. It's an assumed
Well,
no.
and Steve,
Then you feel
let me
forgotten.
ask you a question about asking. Like what I would want to do, I'm a super transparent person. And so I would want to know everything about what's going on,
That's
and I
cool.
would want you, is that cool to, is it, because
It is.
is it good to ask, like, tell me more about what you're dealing with, the
Yeah.
disability or what, whatever that need is.
It would be
Yes.
wonderful because almost nobody does that.
No. And then they cut you off once you start trying to tell them because they don't get it and they don't want to hear anymore.
Or they can't
weren't
take it.
really asking.
Really? So it is good because I think that on this side of the equation, some people feel like, oh, I'm going to be digging into, more than they would want to share or whatever. But
Yeah.
but you're saying it's good to do that.
Yes. And it's up to them if they want to tell you or not. And if
Right.
they choose not to tell you, okay. But most families really long to be seen and heard
Mhm.
desperately, feeling forgotten, feeling outcast. And so if you are willing to truly listen and actually care, and then say, like, would it help if I did some laundry for you this week? Or how about, could I cut your lawn? Wait, do you need your cars washed?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff that
Does
it's
it
really
does it
appreciated.
make those families, so there's a couple of questions I have in here. This will show you my transparency in this stuff. So one of them is, it's like some people talk about this, and a comparison would be like racial things. And sometimes we ask questions or say things. You even alluded to it a minute ago. We say things that are really not very well received because we just don't. We might make a comment that we would think is very, but is taken a certain way by the special needs person, by the person of a different color or whatever it is, because they're different. But we don't know, and I mean, I think that so often we're thinking, and then so how does that? I mean, is it, how does a person avoid that, I guess? And what do they do to kind of, I guess, fit in with that family a little bit without offending them? And
Yeah.
even like asking for things. Some people will be like, kind of, I don't need your charity or whatever. You're just feeling sorry for me, or
And that's up to them.
yeah.
Yeah, that could be up to them.
Mhm.
But in the same vein where you say, I want to be transparent, go ahead
Mhm.
and acknowledge the fact that your experience is not the same as
Mhm.
theirs, and please don't try to equate it. Because if you
Right.
say, oh wow, your kid has problem with epilepsy. Yeah, my kid, he couldn't sleep well. And
Right.
and that really was stressful for us. Was that life threatening?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's not equate those.
Just
Because
accept that everything's different and
just be
that's
cool.
okay.
I don't understand,
Yeah. And that's okay.
and I'd love to know.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to share that with me? I don't
Yeah.
know how I can help you.
Yeah. Probably some
You'd
good
like,
advice would even be, just don't talk about yourself. When you see somebody,
yeah.
until there comes a time where you've crashed. So often, I think it's almost like the one up story. That you're going to tell me a
Oh, yeah.
story, so I'm going to tell you a story. Just being. I think what you said, Katie, was, especially a lot of these families, they just want to be heard,
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
that they really are going through. It's like somebody, if somebody, but I think about it like, when somebody goes through I think you said something really good. I want to explore a little bit, Steve, that you said, like, go further. Like, so often when somebody passes away, somebody wants to help, and there's like, well, if there's anything we can do, well, that's really not going much. It's like, hey, what can we do? Let me get into your life. Let me ask the questions. And let me stay with you too, because I think, even like as a comparison to somebody passing, so often 2 weeks later, that person's still hurting and there's no one there anymore. I mean, these people that with special needs kids, they have real issues for a long time.
Mhm.
And so, what are you willing to do if what is God putting on your heart to
Right.
to help those people, right?
If you love cooking, just say, hey, could I bring you a meal once a month? Or if you love being outside and you're doing yard work, doesn't mean that maybe they don't have that under wraps at home. It just means that you care enough to offer your specialty, what you love to do, to support them, to acknowledge them. And they may say no, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask again.
And try to figure out how what you're good at can be tailored to what they might need. Because if somebody is great at cooking and you say, oh, that'd be lovely. By the way, our kid's allergic to wheat, dairy, soy, tree nuts,
Yeah.
artificial
It's
colors,
true.
artificial flavors. So if
Yeah.
you could cook something that doesn't contain any of those, that'd be great. And then the person's already shut down.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like, well, I'm good at cooking, but then there's that
Well,
level.
and so really what I hear in that is that and sometimes people with special needs kids, they're hard to help
It
Yes.
is.
because
yeah.
of that. And so you have to kind of really go into it with your eyes open and without an agenda. And,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it doesn't work out, as well. Right.
Yes. And I think, gosh, if people know that you're just genuinely wanting to show them love and support and kindness, you can't go wrong. Even if they say no, the fact is they feel loved. I will give you an example. One of our oldest son's friends, we could never attend after a certain point in time, the birthday parties, but never did that mother stop inviting us. And she would say, I know you probably can't come, but I just want you to know we'd love to have you. And it's okay if you can't come. And I will tell you, the last couple times she did that before her son went away to college, just had me in tears because I felt so seen and I didn't feel forgotten. And I knew that they cared. And
Yeah.
she knew we couldn't come, but she didn't forget us. And that means more than anything she could have ever done here on our property or for our family, because she did. It was an emotional, mental support. And, about like the comments that we mentioned earlier, the reason those feel offensive, and different people are sensitive to different ones, but it's because it's taken as being brushed off. We don't want to be told we're strong. We are the most exhausted people, emotionally raw, because we don't know what God is doing here. We're just trying to trust him. We're trying to serve him. We're trying to love our children, our family, and our community. And it's hard.
Yeah.
And so when we're told, oh, you're so strong, you kind of want to deck somebody sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't mean it, but you're so
Well,
darn tired.
and then sometimes, it feels like to me that one of the things that others can do for the special needs community, parents, is just to listen. Is
Yes.
really just to listen without an agenda. And man, it could even be, man, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that guy I was talking about that saw at the conference. He's going through a divorce and he's got a special needs kid, and I can't relate to that. I'm not getting a divorce, nor do I have an autistic kid. And so I just said, man, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry you're going through that. I know that God's big and He's going to help you, and I just pray that you'll step into that, and I think that good things are coming for you, or whatever. I think that you're gonna, and so just encouraging them and listening, I think it sounds like could be a really good approach. We don't have to figure out something to do for them necessarily. It's helpful if we can, but if it doesn't work and we don't know how to cook without the 7 things that are in there, that's okay. I think so many times it can even feel like on the other side that we feel guilt that we can't do more or we can't do. It's like, okay, look, can we just get over that and just realize they're real people with real issues and just listen to them. So that's good.
Yeah.
So back to the special needs people, you have your group. And so let's kind of talk about as we close, what can someone that has a special needs child or thinks they do. I mean, I don't even know if I do or not, but maybe I do. And how can they connect with you guys or others that would help them? What would be your counsel to them?
Sure. Some areas have local get-togethers. We're actually probably going to start one in the spring for outdoor meetups. Some
Hmm.
areas don't. A lot of areas don't. So you could start one if you wanted to in your local area. Or for those of us who have, immune challenged children, That's partly why Steve and I have set up the one we have online, and we get together. There's the dad's campfire meetings, and we have the mom's cups and conversation meetings. We have an expert that we bring in, and, or we teach and train each month, and then we get together and talk about it and help spoon feed the information for the parents who didn't get to watch it. There are lots of ways that you can connect with other people and ask those questions. Does my kid have an issue or not? And sometimes it helps to talk to parents more than doctors, because doctors often, for us at least, have said, oh no, the kid is fine. And that's just that the parent instinct knew sooner than the doctor could tell.
Right.
And a lot of the time
Well, and
parents
so you guys are local. You guys are in the East Coast area, but I mean, so and you guys have your podcast that they can go to, because and what is that? And then is there any other resources you have for parents that might not be able to physically connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. A lot of areas have a Special Olympics, and that might be a good way to find other parents in your region if you wanted in-person connection. Now, not all children can join Special Olympics, but maybe even just contacting an organization in your local area could help you find other parents, just so that you can get to know them.
Right.
That is probably the only organization I could say I know of specifically that would make connections for you in your local area. Otherwise, really, we have our podcast and we have our membership. And
what's the name of your podcast?
It's Her Home and Heart.
Her Home and Heart. We'll have that in the show notes, but I wanted you to kind of catch it. And and that's available on all the podcast platforms, right?
It is, yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for being with us. Man, it's not an easy subject to tackle, as you guys deal with every day. And so, but I think it's really helped our parents to learn some things about, so often when somebody goes through somebody's going through something difficult, it's hard when we're not going through it. And, or if we are going through it, we think we're the only one going through it. And so therefore no one else is out there. The enemy always wants to isolate. And, and so what I hear from you guys is don't be isolated, don't retreat. Don't, God loves community. And so find the community and how much others can be a blessing to those that do have those issues, because just by being listeners and being transparent with because it's kind of like Will Rogers said, we're all ignorant just on different subjects. We all have issues, and we all are dealing with things in life, and the more we can be listeners and transparent with that, the better we're going to bring the issues into the light so they can be helped, right?
Well, sure. And the greatest of these is love. As long as you are acting out of love, you literally can't go wrong.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys, and we appreciate it. And we appreciate the time. And Her Home and Heart is the name of the podcast. So that's the first thing I would do, is just go. It's a wonderful podcast, and I would encourage you to go and listen to that. And then is there a way to connect with you guys on the website, or the website of the podcast, if they wanted to in any way?
Yeah. We have all the links in the description on the podcast. We also have a link tree. It's just Linktree /family success. If families want to go there, we have coupons and goodies and that sort of thing, connections to all of our the membership and the podcast and all that.
All right, guys, thanks so much. And as always, parents, go be crazy, crazycoolfamily.com.